Vanessa had always prided herself on having the perfect life. From the outside, she had it all: an adoring husband, Benjamin, who worked hard to provide for their family, 2 wonderful children, and a beautiful home. She would wake up every morning with the predictable rhythm of her life, sipping coffee on the balcony as her husband caught his usual train. The routines were comforting, and the life they had built seemed to be everything she had ever wanted. But beneath the surface, Vanessa felt a creeping emptiness she couldn't shake. The years of maintaining a spotless facade and focusing all her energy on her family had slowly drained her. Her dreams, once vivid, had long been pushed to the background, and she often felt like a ghost in her own life. The vibrant woman who had once aspired to be something more had faded into the role of the dutiful wife and mother. Her love for Benjamin had been genuine, but the passion had worn thin, leaving her craving excitement and adventure that she hadn't realized she'd been missing. It wasn't long before her dissatisfaction began to simmer, and an unexpected connection with a younger man would soon change everything. It all began with one fateful afternoon, a shift in Vanessa's predictable routine that would forever alter the course of her life. Benjamin's usual train was delayed when he stopped to help a boy rescue a kitten, which put him on a later train. As he passed their house, a sight caught his eye: Vanessa, pressed against the window with her back bare, a young man's hands gripping her waist. The train rumbled by, but Richard was frozen, unable to tear his eyes away. A mix of confusion and devastation flooded him, but rather than confront her right then, he let the scene sink in. What he saw didn't seem like an accident, it felt like something that had been happening for a while. As he continued his daily routine, he couldn't shake the image of Vanessa, entangled in someone else's arms. He watched her more closely, her odd behavior, her secrecy with phone calls, her distracted demeanor. The realization gnawed at him: something was fundamentally wrong. Still, he held his peace, biding his time. Meanwhile, Vanessa, completely unaware of the storm brewing, was busy living out her secret double life. She thought she was being careful, but the cracks were starting to show. As the days passed, the tension in Vanessa's marriage with Benjamin began to suffocate her. She tried to convince herself that the secret affair wasn't a problem, that it was just a fleeting distraction, but it was becoming harder to ignore the cracks in her facade. The small gestures, her secretive smiles, the flirtatious texts she quickly hid, weren't lost on Benjamin. He'd already begun noticing her sudden wardrobe changes, how she picked tighter outfits and styled herself differently, the phone calls she never shared. The small things were adding up, and Richard's suspicion was growing. One afternoon, he overheard her on the phone, laughing softly and speaking in a hushed tone. "We only have 2 hours before he gets home," she whispered, "so don't park out front, just in case." The words hit him like a slap. For the first time, he realized Vanessa wasn't even trying to hide her infidelity anymore. The lie had become too big to maintain, and now, it was spilling out. That night, Benjamin decided he wasn't going to be fooled any longer. He wasn't angry, just determined. He started paying closer attention, watching for any sign of betrayal, anything that might confirm his worst fear. The more he saw, the more he knew. As Benjamin watched Vanessa's behavior grow more erratic, he couldn't ignore the mounting tension between them. He had always prided himself on being patient, a man of reason, but now, everything felt out of control. Vanessa had always been the rock of their home, but now she was hiding secrets, slipping away in the quiet moments when he wasn't watching. One evening, after coming home unexpectedly early, Benjamin noticed something that would forever change his perception of his wife. The curtains in the living room snapped shut when he pulled into the driveway, an unusual sight that immediately raised his suspicions. When he walked inside, everything seemed calm, too calm. Vanessa greeted him with her usual warmth, but there was something off about her smile, the way she stood in the kitchen, deliberately blocking his view of the hallway. As he walked past her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something he wasn't supposed to know. He walked to their bedroom, and when he pushed open the door, he noticed the faint indentation on the bed, the evidence of someone else's presence, someone who shouldn't have been there. His heart raced. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was the undeniable truth. He wasn't living with the woman he thought he knew. Benjamin's patience was wearing thin. For weeks, he had been slowly gathering pieces of evidence, watching Vanessa's every move with increasing suspicion. He had seen the signs, the strange phone calls, the sudden disappearances, the way she would brush off his questions with carefully crafted excuses. But now, the cracks in their marriage were impossible to ignore. One evening, as he sat in his study, staring at the pile of receipts and text messages he had collected, Benjamin knew he had to confront her. But the weight of the confrontation made his stomach churn. Was he ready to face the truth, no matter how painful? He had always prided himself on being calm, controlled, but the discovery that Vanessa, his wife of 20 years, had been hiding something from him, something that wasn't just a mistake, broke something inside him. His mind raced back to moments he had ignored, the late nights, the unfamiliar perfume lingering in the air, the little things that didn't add up. That's when Lucas, their son, came into the room. His expression was guarded. Something was wrong. "Dad, I found something," Lucas whispered, holding up his phone. The message on the screen made Benjamin's blood run cold. "It's not just her. Zomione Else Knoss. We need to be careful." Benjamin's heart dropped. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was something far deeper. Benjamin could feel the tension in the air as he stood outside the apartment building, his mind racing. Lucas had led him here, to the quiet corner of the city where everything had changed. Benjamin had always trusted his brother Thomas, but now with each step he took toward the entrance, his stomach twisted in a mix of dread and disbelief. How could Thomas, of all people, be involved in this betrayal? Inside the apartment, the silence was suffocating. As Benjamin stepped into the dimly lit space, he saw Thomas sitting at the kitchen table, his hands clenched into fists. Vanessa was standing near the door, avoiding his gaze. For a moment, Benjamin stood still, the realization hitting him harder than any confrontation could. His own brother and wife had been living a lie, and now everything he had built, the life, the trust, was shattered. "You both have a lot of explaining to do," Benjamin's voice was cold, controlled. But inside, he felt like everything was crumbling. Thomas didn't speak. Vanessa's face twisted in guilt, her voice faltering. "Ben-I." But there was no saving this, no words that could undo the years of deception. Benjamin turned to leave, his heart heavy with the crushing weight of betrayal. He had given them everything, and now, he would walk away from it all. The days after Benjamin's discovery were a blur of emotions, each one more overwhelming than the last. Vanessa, once the woman he had built his life around, was now a stranger. The house, once a home filled with warmth, felt cold and empty. Benjamin spent his days walking through it in a daze, unable to shake the image of Vanessa and Thomas together. He had never been one to lash out, to let his emotions control him, but now with every passing hour, the anger and betrayal festered, growing louder in his mind. Lucas had been his anchor, his son, the one constant in a world that now felt like it was falling apart. But even Lucas couldn't make the pain go away. Benjamin wanted to protect him, to shield him from the reality that had torn apart their family, but he knew there was no hiding the truth. The weight of it all pressed down on him, and every time he looked at his son, he saw the man he used to be, a man who believed in loyalty, in love, in family. Now, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Late one night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Benjamin sat alone in the dark. His phone buzzed on the table, the name Vanessa flashing on the screen. He hesitated before answering, but part of him knew he needed to hear what she had to say, even if it could never undo what had already been done. The confrontation with Thomas was inevitable, but Benjamin wasn't ready for the reality of it. For weeks, he'd been building up to this moment, rehearsing in his mind what he would say, what he would do. The anger, the heartbreak, it all swirled inside him, but when the time finally came, all that was left was a strange calm. He wasn't sure what had happened to him, but something had shifted. The man who had once been so devoted to his family, to Vanessa, was no longer the same. The betrayal had stripped him down to nothing, but in that nothingness, he found a sense of clarity. As he stepped into Thomas's office, the tension was palpable, thick enough to suffocate. Thomas looked up, his expression unreadable, but Benjamin saw the flicker of fear behind his eyes. For a brief moment, everything seemed suspended in time. Benjamin could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. This wasn't just about confronting Thomas. It was about reclaiming control over a life that had spiraled out of his hands. "How long?" Benjamin asked, his voice low, steady, and filled with the weight of years. Thomas swallowed hard but didn't answer. Benjamin could see it now, there were no more lies, no more pretending. The truth was all that remained. As Benjamin stared at the empty glass in his hand, he realized that the sense of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a cold, numb clarity. For weeks, his life had been a blur of questions, accusations, and fleeting moments of disbelief. But now, as he sat alone in the dim light of his living room, he understood one thing: he couldn't change what had happened. He could only decide what to do next. The idea of confronting Vanessa, of tearing down the life they had built, seemed less daunting now. His thoughts drifted to Lucas, who had been quieter than usual, his expression heavy with the burden of knowing too much too soon. Benjamin hated that his son had been dragged into this mess, but the damage was done. There was no easy way to fix this. His marriage was shattered, his trust broken, and there were no clean answers. In the midst of his uncertainty, a message pinged on his phone, pulling him from his reverie. It was from Thomas, his brother. A simple text: "We need to talk." Benjamin stared at the words, his pulse quickening. Was this it? The final revelation? The last piece of the puzzle? He felt the weight of the moment settle over him. It was time.
Time to face everything head on, for better or worse.
Benjamin paced the living room, his mind racing with the weight of the situation. Every corner of his home, once filled with memories of happy days, now felt like a silent witness to his unraveling life. He couldn't escape the echoes of betrayal that haunted him, each whisper of his thoughts pulling him deeper into confusion. How had it come to this? How had he missed all the signs? Vanessa's lies stung, but it was the impact on their son Lucas that was truly crushing. Lucas had always admired Benjamin's calm, unwavering presence, but now that steady foundation was cracked. How could he explain this to his son? How could he make Lucas understand that the man he had trusted for so long was no longer the same?
Es Benjamin staret out the window, he kaugt sich auf a reflexion in the glass. A shadow standing on the porch.
His heart skipped a beat as he saw Thomas, his brother, standing there with an unreadable expression. There was a moment of hesitation before Thomas walked inside, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Benjamin knew that this conversation would be the one that changed everything. The truth was no longer something he could hide from, it was time to confront the destruction that had been years in the making. Benjamin sat in the dim light of his study, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. He had spent the past week trying to piece together the fractured parts of his life, but every moment felt like a tangled knot, too tight to undo. He had always prided himself on his patience, his ability to control his emotions and think things through. But now, in the silence of the room, he couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of betrayal that gripped him. Vanessa's actions had cut deeper than he ever expected. It wasn't just her affair with Thomas. It was the years of lies, the small moments of neglect, the love that had slowly faded into the background while she built a life with someone else. He had let it happen, convinced that everything would somehow be okay. But the lies had piled up, and now, there was no more pretending. Lucas's absence only added to the weight of it all. His son had always been the one person Benjamin could count on, but now he was distant, caught in the crossfire of this terrible revelation. How could he be the father his son needed when he couldn't even protect the family he had tried so hard to build? Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, his mind swirling. The next step wasn't clear, but he knew it was time to face the truth, no matter how painful. The tension in the room was suffocating, each breath heavier than the last as Benjamin stood before Vanessa, the woman he had once adored. She sat across from him, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with regret. The air between them had shifted, thick with the weight of the truth. Their years together had been filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams, but now, it felt like those moments had all been lies, covered in layers of deceit. Benjamin had spent so long avoiding confrontation, convincing himself that their love was enough to overcome anything. But now, it was clear that love alone couldn't save them. Vanessa spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen. I don't know how it got this far," she confessed, the words tumbling out like a confession she had been holding for too long. Benjamin didn't reply right away, his mind racing. He had so many questions, so much anger, but more than anything, he felt an aching sadness. This wasn't the life he had envisioned for himself. Not like this. "You betrayed everything," he finally said, his voice raw but steady. "You took away something I thought was untouchable." Silence hung between them, both of them knowing that whatever came next would change everything. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the life they had built and whether it was worth salvaging. The days following the confrontation were a blur of emotion and quiet desperation. Benjamin could barely look at Vanessa without seeing the betrayal, without feeling the weight of everything that had crumbled between them. Their once comfortable home now felt like a prison, each room holding echoes of laughter, of memories that had now been tainted by lies. The constant thought that lingered in his mind was the realization that their marriage, the foundation of their lives, had been built on something fragile. Was love enough to repair the damage? Or had the cracks grown too deep to mend? But as Benjamin wrestled with his heartbreak, a new clarity began to emerge. He realized that moving forward didn't have to mean staying in the past, trapped by the hurt Vanessa had caused. He could choose a new path, even if it meant walking away from the life he thought he knew. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but there was a growing sense that he could rebuild. Perhaps this was the beginning of finding himself again, rediscovering the pieces of himself that had been lost in the whirlwind of disappointment and self-doubt. With each day, the pain of the betrayal softened, and Benjamin knew that healing was a long road, but it was one he was finally ready to travel. In today's world, relationships can often face unexpected challenges, and betrayal can leave deep scars. However, it's important to remember that healing starts with understanding our own emotions and taking ownership of our paths forward. If you're feeling lost, hurt, or confused, take the time to reflect on what you truly need, whether that's forgiveness, space, or a fresh start. Don't let the fear of change keep you stuck in a painful cycle. Prioritize your well-being, and seek support from friends, family, or professionals to rebuild your strength. Embrace the opportunity to start anew, and remember, your happiness is in your hands.